Welcome back to The Bomb with AUZZYNAPALM, the most explosive podcast in Kingston, Ontario. And friends, imagine being able to sit down and chat with someone who designed the toys you played with as a kid and currently makes the ones you collect as an adult. Sounds a bit like a dream, doesn't it? Well, I got to live that exact dream today on this episode interviewing my guest, Jeremy Padwer. He's an entrepreneur, collectibles expert, and global toy maker, working with companies like Mattel, Jakks Pacific, and Jazzwares. Working with brands in the past such as WWE, Dragon Ball Z, Hot Wheels, Masters of the Universe, and currently working with brands like Pokemon, AEW, Halo, Fortnite, Roblox, UFC, Micro Machines. The list goes on. There are legitimately so many I had to cut it down to these ones alone just to save time on the intro. In this episode, you'll hear us discuss topics like collectibles, toy development hurdles through 2020, how you can start into collectible investing with just $1,000 budget, and as long as you have passion in something, you can find value. One note, as my own fact checker and editor, I'm well aware in this episode I said Jazzawares as opposed to Jazzwares. Sometimes my brain decides to add extra letters to things, especially when I'm excited. And so pretty much every time throughout this episode, I refer to the company as Jazzawares as opposed to Jazzwares. I am well aware of the mistake. With that being said, during our initial pre-recording, we just jumped right into the conversation. And so let's just do the same now on today's episode of The Bomb with AUZZYNAPALM.
Oh, no, that's my pleasure, man. My pleasure.
Yeah, and again, we'll cover it a bit when we do get into it. One of the reasons I reached out to you, like I said, you seem so approachable. Anytime I've commented on anything, if it deems a response, you respond, and you're just so active. It's never felt like, celebrity, famous person, fan. It's always felt peer-to-peer, which is just so awesome.
Oh, thank you. I listen, I feel the same way. Like, I don't feel... from where I sit today, it required a few very special breaks that I will tell you. I would have, on the other side of this, I'm a bigger collector than I am a manufacturer of anything. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I can 100% say that, I'm a collector and fan, and excited to talk to you as well.
Well, that's awesome. And I'll just actually skip the intro and do that after because we're getting right into it here. Have you always been a collector?
Yeah, absolutely. Since I was a very little kid, I collected things like baseball cards, sports memorabilia, coins, stamps, even a little bit of World's Fair paraphernalia, autographs, toys. It's always been in my blood.
Myself as well. I remember I've always been a specific collector though. Like when it comes to hockey cards, I would collect goalies because I was always attracted to the helmets. One of my earliest collections too was dice, but they all had to be different. It couldn't just be like, there's another 6-sided die to add to the collection. But as the years passed, I got into Magic the Gathering, would have been the biggest one for me. Big passion, actually. I was a judge for a few years.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, and that's when I fully became aware of what a collectibles market could be on the secondary end of it.
I can only imagine. So when you, so how long were you involved with Magic from a collecting side?
Dialed back in the last few years, but I'd say 10 years of solid playing, collecting, investing, to the point where I would joke to my ex that, I could pay rent at any given point with these. And sometimes I would just flip a few cards and come home. And
That's amazing. And I will tell you, like, I think a lot of people end up with value in their collections, primarily not because they were seeking that out, but because they had a specific passion for a particular area or category.
Yeah, I agree.
And wherever you find passion, you find value. The two things go hand in hand because it's all about emotional connectivity. If you, a platform that's collectible, in addition to a passion for a brand, equals some really outstanding outcome.
Yeah, and it also creates lifelong fans slash investors. And
Yeah.
I see it a lot right now with what you're doing with Jazzware and the AW line. Um,
Oh yeah.
I was talking about my wife about this one today. I remember early on when you first released the Orange Cassidy prototype. By the end of the day, you had done a post saying, "All right, guys, I hear you. He absolutely needs pocket molds." And
Yeah.
just something like that alone was, fantastic on the collector's side because it's something like, it's like, oh, that would be cool to have. And now we do because you're so
So
involved on our end of it as well as the production side.
well, but I view the consumers to be part of the product development process.
Right.
So it's like we're teammates in a lot of ways because the you know the team component of this is the same as if we were partners because if the consumer doesn't buy the product when it's on shelf, you're done. So you might as well they're like the most powerful people in the room. And I think a lot of people miss that, honestly. They miss the fact, a lot of manufacturers miss the part that it's not the buyer that you're playing to, it's the consumer. They're your boss.
100%. Because even for me, something as simple as nice packaging goes such a long way because the adult collector likes to leave it packaged, and I feel a lot of companies put that on the back burner and it's just boring, simplistic. Whereas even as back as when you were doing the classic superstars, the products you put out have always just looked good in box, good out of box, and that goes a long way, as you said, on the consumer side.
Yeah, look, the packaging I love, especially in things that have a collector market. I love a great package because, well, there's two things. One, it makes amazing displays, and two, it makes for a consumer that probably wants to buy two if they're going to be playing with one. And I say that openly. Like I'm not trying to pull any wool over people's eyes. I want the packaging to look great. It's worth putting a little bit more money into the packaging, and at the end of the day, it's more profitable and everybody wins. Like I'm good with
And,
that.
and like you said, a lot of collectors, myself included, my WWE guy is Rey Mysterio. So when I get a really good on card one for my loose collection, I'm always like, oh, now I got to track down a Lucy to display with the other ones.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And yeah, I don't think it's pulling wool over because we're well aware of what we're getting into at those
Yeah.
stages.
No, consumers are not helpless. In fact, I think today, maybe more than ever, that's where the power is. And especially when you're talking about a brand like AEW or like a wrestling brand, because you're dealing with other living, breathing humans who are all, whether they're responding to every social media outcry or not, they see them. And what do humans generally respond to? The loudest cries.
Yep.
So look, for me, I just take it all very openly, and the objective is just to constantly improve and like the other day, someone mentioned about the stands and the fact that our figures were not necessarily the easiest to stand because we put holes in the feet, but they're not compatible. I'm like, so the quickest way to resolve that, listen to the fans, hear what their needs are, create something and put it on like Amazon or Ringside where you can sell a bunch of these things together. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it won't be a big profit margin item. Who cares? It makes the experience better. So
And like you said, that's one of those buy two situations where you're going to want packs of stands because the people buying stands need multiple. So
that's right.
might not be a big profit, but it is a necessity. And the fact you're listening goes such a long way. Another thing I think is awesome is working with such a young company like AW. You're giving all these young stars their first action figure, which they
That's
might
so
not
great.
necessarily get for many more years grinding the industry. So for me to see, Sammy Guevara getting his figure in this next wave, Darby Allin, all these young guys who are becoming new favorites of mine that I can't wait to keep watching. It's so awesome to see. And again, I don't think it would be possible without what you guys are doing over at Jazzawares.
Yeah, listen, I really appreciate your saying that. It's for us, it's just critical to engage at the at you know I would say at the most personal level humanly possible, knowing that it's impossible to communicate with everyone
Hmm.
all the time, but our ears to the ground and we hear the big notes. We're picking up on it. We're reacting to it. Magic and Greg have done a great job from a marketing and from a brand and from a design standpoint, and it's just exciting. It's exciting times.
Yeah, and I can't wait to get my hands on them. They're sparse here in Canada, but I,
Sorry about that.
no, it's not you guys. It's us collectors. Everyone's buying too, right?
Well, I think listen, there's a few things that have happened. Like distribution has been challenging for a few reasons, and I'll kind of go into that.
Yeah, sure.
When you have a new brand in the toy business, it doesn't really matter how big you are as an organization. Every single brand is like a startup. And what I mean by that is, while it may not be a startup from a cash perspective, it's a startup in terms of influencing the right factory to work with you and to dedicate enough space in that factory, even though they've never heard of this brand before,
Right.
to allocate enough workers to this brand, even though if they misallocate something, they tend to they're the ones that end up paying the biggest price in the end. Making sure that your processes are good and the manufacturing processes. We had skin tone issues in wave one.
The Kenny
Making sure,
Omega.
yes, making sure that at a retail level they're ordering enough stuff. If they order too much, you're dead after the first wave. If they order too little, you may have people who are aggravated. So, I mean, honestly, all in all, there were all of the stumbling blocks that I anticipated, some that I didn't. And I'd say that we're really in a good position going into the second year, or really the second season of putting out a brand that people are getting closer and closer and closer to the needs of the consumer.
Yeah, and I think if it was any other year, COVID aside, right, the demand it would still be high, but it wouldn't be as cutthroat right now as it is, right? With everyone being online, the second something goes up, that in-store purchasing is going down. So finding it on the shelves, I find, our Walmart would get, even with the WWE stuff, one run of the elites, one run of everything. Yeah. And that will balance out with when the world balances out, hopefully.
Well, I think the COVID COVID played a role in the response time in terms of some of the manufacturing and factory stuff. Only in that it's really difficult to have the number of humans on the ground in China. We have a big team there,
Mm-hmm.
but generally speaking, on a brand launch, what we would also do is accompany them with like brand people, or I would fly over once and sit down and look at all the processes and study things and making sure that like there's a lot that you miss when you have a full month quarantine. Like when you go into China right now, when you go from Hong Kong to China, you get to the border and they say 2 weeks, and they choose the hotel you're going to, and you are literally in their possession for 2 weeks. They let you loose, and you go back to Hong Kong and get another. I mean, it is a nightmare. So, we made do. We made do. It's a brand launch at a difficult time.
With restrictions like that, getting anything done is above and beyond, I would say.
Well, it's also been quite a good year. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm not going to complain at all. I mean, the brands that we have include Fortnite and Roblox, and Coco Melon in preschool is huge, and Peppa Pig and Pokemon and Cabbage Patch Kids and so on and so forth. It's a really wonderful time.
I'd be amiss if I didn't sneak Halo in there for my gaming fans.
Halo, by the way, the fact that the game hasn't launched yet, but the product launched, significantly prior to the game. It's going really well, and I think that I think consumers are digging it. I think consumers are totally digging the product
They're
launch.
really gorgeous. They're the figures that should have been around for Halo this whole time.
Oh, that's awesome to hear.
Well, imagine the sales on those with Halo 2.
Oh, it would
I
have
would have
been
had the whole run,
it would have been absolutely insane. But Listen, when this game finally launches, and I don't even remember what I know and what I'm not supposed to know,
Right, fair.
but what have they communicated so far in terms of the game launch date?
Honestly, I've become a little jaded to the game delays, and I know it's no one's fault. So I'm just when it comes out, it comes out. That's how I am.
Right.
I don't mind whenever it's available. You know.
And I find these game delays pretty interesting because I've always believed that some of the more solitary people are people that are coding games and developing games,
Hmm.
because a lot of what you're doing is, but you know what? It turns out that it is truly a team effort. It is a lot of crossover work, and this is definitely not an area of expertise when it comes to the development of games. It's always sort of been in my head that you have geniuses sitting there and coding and figuring stuff out, but people are working together.
Well, I know a lot of people who were complaining about Cyberpunk is the most relevant one happening right now. And I always would make the example of, do you remember the Postal Service, the band in the early 2000s? They became really well known, and their name says it is because it was two musicians mailing each other back and forth demos, creating the songs that way. So I always say the fact that that made their name and who they were because of how they were doing it. Think about now the fact that's what game developers have to be doing.
Yeah,
So we got to
yeah,
cut them some slack.
I think so.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree.
We're in a very hypercritical and self gratification. Everything's now, now, now. So I get it, but I try to look beyond that kind of thing. And I feel
Yeah.
with Cyberpunk specifically, they've been very open about that.
So Cyberpunk is one that I have to say I was really looking forward to.
Hmm.
Um, so like with something like that, are they going to did they put out the game and they're going to put it out again like a newer version, or how are they going to be reacting to that?
So they pulled the ones from the PlayStations that were really really broken, full refunds, and they have come out since with the COs, and they did a video owning up to everything and putting out their got like projection for the year for updates, bug fixes, so on and so forth. But also letting us know that it's not going to affect any of their other games, the extra work they're putting into fixing these problems. And I respect that.
Fair. That's very fair.
As a consumer, I respect a company owning it and saying, we're making it better, and here's exactly how we're making it better.
What more might one expect? And you know what? Hopefully, one thing that COVID has done is it's, even if you're a consumer, it's given us all a little bit more of a humanity towards one another.
Hmm.
We recognize that, unless you're managing hedge funds, and that's a whole other story. But it seems like for the rest of us, you go, okay, look, that person has done well in the toy industry, but they're also human. You know how I know? Because we're talking literally right now. They're dealing with the same stuff. The dog barks too much when the doorbell rings. The mail got wet because it was raining. I sewed up a beanbag the other day. Like I'm just telling you, like the humanity is at the forefront, and I think that because people are stepping in front of what they're doing more and more and more. The conversations, the fact that we're all in our homes talking instead of me talking in a in an office that's a little bit more less personal. I just think there's a lot of positives that have come out of COVID. It hasn't just been a horrible time. It's also been a time where we've had fewer contacts, but in those fewer contacts, we've become much more human. So back to the cards and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So do you continue to collect TCGs? And if so, I got one today that I've been looking at, and I haven't played it. But what do you know about Flesh and Blood?
I'm behind my setup here. Me and my wife purchased a box earlier this year to try it out.
Nice.
I love the mechanics. I love the artwork, and what those guys are doing to ensure that it's both collectible and playable is super genius. And I think a lot more companies need to take a look at that model.
What are they doing differently? What are they doing?
They are doing a small amount of first edition print runs, and I believe you have access to know how many of each set there is. And the foiling in the first editions are different. They're called cold foils. Very similar to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Ultimate rares. That kind of like embossed, you could feel it foiling. Um, but they're a real gamble because your cold foil isn't guaranteed to be a rare or higher or anything. So you could open up one of those first editions and get a common.
Got it.
But
Got it.
yeah, I've checked that game out and I like it. I want to jump into the collectible stuff just a little later.
Sure.
But one of the things I did want to talk to you about, and I'm not sure many people who follow you are aware of your earlier starts with the internet entrepreneuring. And you shared a really great post recently about how you gamed YouTube or Yahoo. And
Yeah.
that post was a fascinating read. And I kind of wanted to dive into that because I want to know how you were figuring out that kind of thing with the internet when most people didn't have access to it or barely understood it.
A few things. So I'm 47, which means I'm quite old, and a few things occurred. So when I was about 12, my older brother was really getting into bulletin board services. And bulletin board services were essentially um, one computer to one computer, individual point of contact internet. So you could call into somebody else's computer, and when you were in their computer, they would have a sealed off area where you could play games, have a message board, and communicate with other people. And because it was only a peer to peer, you would log off, and then somebody else would log in. So I would have 20 BBSs lined up. I'd dial one, busy, 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 got one, and then I would be messing around on their computer for a bit of time. As that evolved, it evolved into a multi-node thing where multiple people could be on a computer at once. And then it became, an AOL situation where there was sort of a hub. And my older brother, who's 13 years older than me, was one of the original content providers for AOL.
Oh, wow.
And so by the time I was in college, I had a very unusually strong knowledge of how to, traverse a digital world. So in 1996, I started creating websites where you could basically, it was very simple, but you could basically buy and sell things with no transaction costs because they were basic guest books. But I was gaming Yahoo, and Yahoo essentially was a phone book. It was a very early search engine. It had zero algorithms whatsoever. The only algorithm that it had was somebody that you would submit for a category, so like Beanie Babies. And if your name happened to have two A's, you'd be the first one on that list within any category, and you, as a result, would get the most traffic. So being a bit, being a bit of a hustler, I started creating category after category, submitting them, and showing up first in a lot of different categories in the toy space. And then I had a lot of daily users coming through my through my little network, and I was converting that into advertising with like affiliate programs like Amazon, or Disney had a program called the Blast program, and some direct with retail. And then I started buying domain names with some of the proceeds, because my theory was that this traffic that people were typing in domain names and see, like, if they wanted candy, they'd go to candy.com, and that would have value. And I was definitely right there. And I bought some amazing names like act.com, which, I then turned as a tremendous profit, and the rest is history. I mean, I was paying for school. I was not a kid that came from, money. I was a kid that, knew that I had to pay for my own college and take debt. And I was a hustler. And so that was a good combination of things.
Well, I'm glad you said that last bit there too, because I really have appreciated your transparency you show on social media. You mentioned your 60K debt when all this started. And I feel a lot of the people my age and my listeners are in a similar boat where we have a lot of school debt and maybe we're working in an industry that we didn't study for necessarily. And so seeing someone like you is very inspirational for people, especially in my shoes where, we're in a state where it doesn't feel like anything's happening, but just with the right work and right situations, you can make something happen. And I think us chatting today is a great example.
Well, I'm thrilled to, and I will tell you that it's today you have more control over your destiny than maybe at any other time in history. Now, student debt sucks, and student debt is a huge anchor. Okay, but on the other side, the democratization of entrepreneurship through the opportunities that we have online to go to garage sales, buy things, then list them on an eBay store, to go to discount shops and buy things because you become savvy at things that are discounted there for God knows what reason. Maybe they overstocked and they need to get out of it. There's a lot of ways that you can create value, and then to continue to try to create value. Uber, Etsy, like I could keep going on and on and on and on about ways that you don't necessarily have to work for someone else only. So, but the key here is there's no way to avoid the hard work. It's the question is, how much control do you want over the hard work? Do you want 100% control over it? Do you want 50? But where I find challenging is, people who are bummed, they work in a category they don't particularly love. They work in an industry or in a job that they don't love. They've got a lot of debt. But then there's nothing else that they do to try to rise above it. When the truth is, those things are available. They are. It just is uncomfortable. And so for so many years, it required an uncomfortable amount of hustle for me to put myself in a position where I felt comfortable enough communicating with other people that it can work. Because what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to have these types of conversations not in an earnest way, because I can say that I definitively went at it on my own, did the debt thing, hustled, worked for other people, worked for myself, and made it happen.
That's so more fulfilling than saying, my parents got me into this college, I got this degree, and now I work at, their company or whatever.
Hey, but by the way, I will just tell you this right now. I think that also can be great. It can suck and it can be great. There's no judgment, You have 10 people, you have 10 different ways that they can get somewhere. But it is very fulfilling to do something on your own. Mm-hmm. It's very fulfilling to know that, you had a white sheet of paper and you had to turn it into something. And then you had to turn it into something. It's very fulfilling. So, for people that did have that, where they came from wealth, they didn't pay for school, there's some people feel fulfilled, others don't. For those that don't, I'd say the exact same thing. Go hustle. Even if you have a successful gig, go hustle and create something else.
So was it your work with the internet domains and websites that led you to Mattel originally?
Well, so as I was doing all of this online, I was in law school, and and what I realized was I wasn't really going to be a great agent for somebody else. I had to be my own person.
And now, what kind of law were you studying, if I may ask?
In the States, when you go to law school, it's very generalized.
Oh, okay. Yep.
You specialize after you graduate. So there were some classes that were required. There were some classes that were extracurricular, but I don't really claim any sort of subspecialty. It's really, you get a Juris Doctorate, and then you go practice. And when you practice, you really do become a lawyer. In fact, frankly speaking, there's probably a different system and way to do it, where you could be an apprentice and basically have maybe 1 year of law school and 2 or 3 year apprenticeship. But I don't want to take down the institution so quickly. Great law students don't necessarily make for great lawyers, and crappy law students can make for great lawyers. There's an old saying in law school: an A student is a judge, a B student is a litigator, and a C student is a millionaire. And that and actually that ended up being true for me, because I was very, very average. But I did have a successful entrepreneurial thing going on the side, and that's when I went to business school at Vanderbilt, which was a lot more up my alley. And at that point in time, I was able to pay for my school as I was going on, which is really cool. And that I got recruited to Mattel out of Vanderbilt Business School.
That's awesome. Yeah. Because when I was doing my research, that's kind of what it felt like, but it didn't say specifically what led them to you.
I mean, I will say this: I did interview for the job, and they did reject me, and I did take the rejection letter and rip it into 1,000 pieces, and then somehow I've rarely done this in my life, I just separated myself from the situation, and almost pretended like I never received it. It was like I walled it off. I compartmentalized it. I was like, I didn't get that letter. And I started calling the head of HR, Ramy Quick. I called her like every week. Hi, Ramy. Do you know when I'm going to hear back? And I think finally she was just like, whoa, like, what is going on? Like, we know we rejected this kid. But ultimately, they gave me a job interview on Harry Potter. And I didn't get it, but I impressed some people on another brand. And ergo, here we are, 21 years later, and I ended up buying the Grail Potter book, which I'm very proud of.
That's such a cool story too, because for my age, I grew up with Harry Potter. He was essentially my age when the books were coming out.
Oh, that's really amazing. That must have felt really cool. Very empowering. Very empowering.
It was too, in the sense, like, she really wrote it well. Like, in the fourth book, when he's 14, is when he's starting to notice girls. And I was like, hey, I'm going through this too, Harry. But yeah, for the people listening who don't know, Jeremy recently bought a first edition Harry Potter book, and it is being said to be the most paid for a book written in the last 50 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a world record. I know a lot of people think it's nuts, but I'll explain my rationale. But it was the first edition, first print. They only made 500. Remember, the author was an unknown.
Mm-hmm.
They printed 500 pieces. They gave 300 to the British libraries. 200 went to primarily kids. They were all very much well loved and read and beat up and thrashed and written in and stamped. And I found an absolute pristine one that had sold on Heritage Auctions about 4 years ago for $83,000, and I offered what turned out to be $193,000. I got it, and there are books that don't really come close from a condition standpoint that are in the first edition, first print, that are selling in the mid hundreds, so 130 to 150. So I feel really good. Being a card collector, if you're a TCG collector or you're a sports card collector, what evaluation difference there is between like a 5 and a 10.
Yeah, even a 9 and a 10.
Even a 9 and a 10. And I would say that, this book is about as close to a 10 as you can get. And the books that I see trading in the 130 to 150 range are like 3s and 4s, if I were to draw a comparison. So I feel really, really good about that acquisition, and I'm proud that I can do it, and it meant a lot to me, and it also means a lot to me that my wife trusts me.
No doubt on that one. And I mean, again, your passion really shows through. The day you announced it on social media, you had your Harry Potter robes on and your wand out, right? So it's not like you're not just some guy with money who's like, hey, this is the next investment. You have the love for the things you're investing in.
Yes.
And
yes,
I feel people listening would be mad at me if I didn't get a little bit into Pokemon. You have a very nice collection going, and seemingly it started before this recent boom with the amount you have purchased. How long have you been collecting in Pokemon?
So I have been collecting in Pokemon for the last really the last few years, but primarily about 6 months before the big boom.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you a little bit of a background, like I've been involved, and I think I mentioned this already, I've been involved with Pokemon for about 15 years.
Yep.
And all the way back to about '06. And when I first got involved, it was really primarily just a kids brand. There wasn't there was not really a huge adult collector business. I mean, it was, kids that were 6 to 12 years old were now, some of them were 15, 16, 17, but there really wasn't a 30-year-old with access to money or capital buying stuff. So, but I did start noticing that the value of certain Pokemon items was increasing year after year, especially like some of the key items like the first edition Charizard. And I was watching the first edition sets, and then I saw a set sell for like $100,000 and it really piqued my interest. Well, I sold my toy company to a company called Allegheny Capital, which is like a Berkshire Hathaway type company.
Okay,
They're private equity, but they're not a private equity that looks to dump a company. They really nurture and dive deeply into a category. So they had made a prior purchase, Jazzwares. And really it was Jazzwares and Allegheny working together with Jazzwares directing. But then they paired us together, and, I just wanted Pokemon to know that my heart is, whether I'm a smaller partner in a bigger firm or whether I own the entirety or part of a company with partners, like my two business partners. And I just wanted them to know how serious I was about being part of Pokemon forever. So I'm also a very savvy collector.
yeah.
And I was noticing that the valuations were increasing, and yet there was a set available, and it was $129,000. And I was adding up the value of the Hollows cards, and I was like, wow, the value of the Hollows are like 180. I was like, how can this set? But anyways, I didn't question it. I just bought the set.
And that was a base set 10 set?
A PSA 10, all 10 first edition base set.
Cool.
Yeah, card
Cool.
1 through 102, but both Pikachus and both Machamps. And
Red cheeks, yellow cheeks, and yeah.
And then the first edition, and then the unlimited first edition, which is really weird for that other card. But anyways, the point is that, then I was like, you know what, that was fun, and also it was a profitable thing, and so I'm going to go way deep in this.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do it my way, which is to say, I'm going to identify where I think the most value is. And so I put a lot more into it, probably close to 7 figures into Pokemon before the boom.
Okay.
Before the boom. And so I focused on things like 1999 Trainer Deck A and B. I focused on 1995 to 1999, primarily putting together the best, highest grade Charizard and Pikachu sets that I could. Of course, the first edition cards, the 95 Top Sun, 96 Cardis, 96 original Pokemon cards from Japan, TCG. And anyways, the point is, these were the categories that I very specifically focused in on. And frankly speaking, I've been very, focused on those categories throughout. I haven't really ventured past 2000. And I know that there's amazing sets like Neo Genesis and some of the other stuff that's happening. But for me, I'm keeping it old school, man. Keeping it old school.
Well, and you said it too about the 96 to 2002. I'm actually that age range. So, I was born in 90. I'm 30 now. This is such a relevant thing to me. And your comment on someone's post on your social media was my main basis for wanting to sit down with you today. You said something really interesting. Someone was saying it's a lot easier for you to give investment advice because you're a millionaire, yada, yada, yada. And your response, it really stuck with me because you said you'd be happy to give collectors advice with even $1,000 budget. And I feel that, especially with what's going on in not only Pokemon, but everything else right now, all the collector markets, that'd be a great thing to dive into with you because personally, that would probably be around my budget if I was going to start in an investment collectible or stocks even, let's say.
Yep.
So yeah, I really want to just get in that with you today.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you have $1,000 to invest, there are I would say invest in a category that you love. Don't put $1,000 into something that you don't just because you think that that particular collectible area is hot. Put something in that you're willing to spend the time studying. And if you study an area that you love and you can identify little nuances, like I love Pokemon, I really do. I've been
Yeah.
around it for so long. I didn't grow up with it, but it was part of my entire, like most of my professional career in toys. So for me, I studied it and I became really good of mapping out a particular era. What I would say is map out what you particularly love. There's a lot of good intel out there. You can look at all the eBay sold auctions. You can identify whether it's transistor radios or old electronic equipment or whatever it may be.
Right.
But the other thing is, with $1,000 to invest, there's also, like I said, flea markets, garage sales, and discounters. Don't necessarily go out and buy one thing for $999. Maybe try to figure out a way to turn your $1,000 into $2,000 over 6 months and say, I'm going to buy 20 things with an average of a $50 price tag, or maybe even less by going around and really discriminating. And I do believe that you can. And it's interesting thing about the principle of twos is that you realize if you start with one and you double it every day, by the 30th day, you have probably more money than Elon Musk. And let me prove it to you. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
ready? So day 2 is 2. Okay, 4, 8, 16, 32. You have 32 after 5 days. 64, 128, 256, 512, 1,024 after 10 days. 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, 16, 32 after 15 days. 64, 128, 256, 512, $1 million after 20 days. 2 million, 4 million, 8 million, 16 million, 32 million after 25 days. 64, 128, 256, 500 million, a billion after 30 days, starting with just $1. So
Crazy.
that's the rule of twos. So if you can flip and you can double 30 times, you're a billionaire starting with $1. So, can you do it with $1,000? I think you can. And if you can kind of make your way through my $1 billion in 30 days idea, the bigger idea is that you have a whole lifetime to figure that out.
Well, I totally understand the concept because that's actually how I've been approaching my podcast. Is I've set a goal for listens, and then I'm like, all right, it got this much. The next one I want to double that, and that's how I've just been approaching this. Is that rule of two
Great.
you're saying? Because if I put in twice the work, I should get twice the results, and that's kind of how I've been thinking and looking at this one.
Well, I think it's awesome, and I suspect that with continued hard work, it'll be amazing what you're able to accomplish.
Coming from you, that's a big compliment, sir. I really appreciate that. So I feel like we're coming up to the end here, but I just want to wrap up on a nice one here. Recently, it was yesterday, you shared the new AW line, the new UFC, and I believe it was Roblox was the third yesterday?
No, Micro Machines.
Micro Machines, that was the third.
Yeah.
So those three have new lines coming out. What else can we look forward to in the first quarter from you guys? That I didn't say the whole year. That's why I said the first quarter alone.
Oh my gosh, there's so much, really. I mean, between Roblox and Fortnite and Halo and Pokemon and Micro Machines and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the preschool properties. It's just, it's amazing. I mean, look, like I said, in 7, 8 years ago, we started with a blank piece of paper, and while Jazzwares was already around, they were also much smaller. And to think that we're one of the largest toy companies in the world now, hey, it's the same thing. It's slowly but surely. You keep pushing and pushing and pushing and working hard. and making some good decisions and having a little bit of luck. But luck isn't everything. It's the good decisions and the hard work that matter the most. A little luck can get you something fantastical. But at the end of the day, I guess the truth is that if you have hard work and you make good decisions, and you mix a lot of failure in there, because everyone fails and you need to fail. It's all part of the process. You will, and at the end of the day, no matter what, even if you've not had a single stroke of luck, you will have a very fulfilling and meaningful and successful career.
Luck is grabbing the edge of the mountain, but hard work's pulling yourself to the top.
You got it, man. You got it.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for being here today. Again, it means a lot, and I look forward to everything coming from you this year and all the collectible advice you share with us.
Well, my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, brother. Today's episode of The Bomb made possible by The Bomb Squad, at Dream Sauce Design Company, at Neats, and at Hebden Beats. Find their links in the description down below. Peace.